We have Jaz Marfo, who is a certified coach, same girl, community manager, ambitious careers expert, lover of tea and R&B, okay? Let's go. Jaz has a mission to help high achievers create limitless careers without overwhelm or underwhelm so they can avoid the Sunday night dread and dream big instead. Okay, what a line. Living for the line. Love that. We have this talk, which is sponsored by Uscreen, and it is on navigating the 360 view of advocacy as a community manager. And with that, Jaz, I'm going to give you the stage.
Amazing. Thank you so much. I'm so very excited to be here and have these conversations. I see them as conversations. We won't be having slides today. We're going to have a conversation. So jump into the chat. Do not be a stranger. Do not be shy. We are here to connect and connect quite especially around the topic of 360 advocacy. Now, as you heard from my bio, I am both a career coach and a community manager. And in many ways, that will set the context for the way that we're going to have the conversation today. And in many ways, I've had the privilege of blending the two to thrive and also survive, which actually brings me to today's topic. Many times, as community managers, we are caught in the middle. Okay. And for those who don't know, let me illustrate what caught in the middle looks like. It looks like your community wanting something and your commercial director wanting an opposite. It maybe looks like the community growing organically and the company not being quite ready. It looks like community led growth being just this far away, but the strategy of the organization wants to go in a completely other direction. These are some of the bigger examples of being caught in the middle, not to mention maybe the day to day of decisions being made, when things should be done, prioritizing resources. And very often we find ourselves as that person in between who is actually working for the good of everyone, but occasionally needs to become or step into the temporary role of an enemy to one. This is a really challenging part of our role that isn't necessarily written in the job description, right? We have conversations, everyone's full of beans, it's rainbow sprinkles, that's what I like to call it. And then you get into the seat and then you find that some of the work to commit to, buy into, step into community hasn't necessarily always been done. And so you have those sprinklings of conversations of reminding folks of the purpose, reminding folks of the power of community, reminding folks of what came through that feedback. Serena in the last session mentioned the importance of collecting that. So many times, one of the very common stuck in the middle moments is having that feedback and then being delayed in taking the action. And as a result, for better or worse, we are the people that get the message. We are the people that go, hey, we told you this thing, what's happening? And having to again be stuck in that middle. So this by no means is me saying that I'm going to eradicate it. This is actually about ways for us to overcome that challenge, to make that challenge, I guess, more acceptable to us and less soul destroying, which it can be at times. But I'd love to see in the chat, let me know if you've ever felt caught in the middle. And if you feel comfortable to share, of course, you can share it in an anonymized way. What did that look like for you? What were those conversations? What was that real sticky moment? Okay. Feel free and pop that in the chat and I'll keep moving forward. So, advocacy. I like a dictionary definition to keep it simple, right? It is defined as public support for or recommendation of a particular cause or policy. For us, we're talking about cause. For us, we're talking about needs. For us, we're talking about requirements, changes, adaptations. All of those different things are things that we advocate for, whether that looks like a business case in your organization or a quick Slack message or a 16 slide presentation. You are inherently an advocate. And ultimately, there are three ways that you can really overcome the challenge that is inherent in that advocacy. And spoiler alert, I'll tell you exactly what they are. The first one is to cultivate resilience. The second one is to protect your perspective. And the last is to focus on your purpose. Okay, so those are the three. Spoiler alert, it's out there. First one, cultivate resilience. Community is deeply personable. It is unavoidable. It is a hazard of the role. Even when we look at the roots of how community came about and the fact that it's still very early on in its stage of being formalized as a profession, a lot of us tumbleweed into community, or we end up doing it naturally and then get dubbed with the label later. And what it means is that if something is going wrong or there is an element of disappointment, there is a missed opportunity, it's very easy for us to take it personally, even more so when we're in the middle and we are advocating. Now, there is power in us being vulnerable in this moment and being a person in these moments, but there's also a space for us to understand that that takes something from us. So, when it comes to those moments, cultivating resilience both in the moment and outside of it can become really, really powerful. So, that can look like having a reflective practice, right? As you go into, I'm going to use the example of a pitch, for want of a better word, right? For a change, a proposal for a change. You can ask yourself things like, what do I know about myself, the situation, and the wider context? This way, you're able to remind yourself of your capability and what you bring to the table. You can remind yourself of things that you maybe haven't missed in the moments that have become quite infuriating, hurtful, or just where you feel simply misunderstood. Resilience looks different to all of us. Resilience itself is just the ability to recover from a setback. It's an ability. So, if we also remember that, it can be helpful for us to reflect on times where we have pushed through or we have overcome. Regardless of whether that looks like something in your personal life or in your professional life, it's still you at the core of this resilience. And this can become a foundation because, as much as you are caught in the middle today and you may win the challenge today, tomorrow there may be a new one. And what we don't want is an industry where we are becoming eroded by these setbacks. In fact, we're able to take them with a growth mindset. And I don't say that in a woo woo way. I say that in a very practical sense that growth mindset is about believing that through effort we can improve things, through you changing your approach to the challenge, through you changing your approach to persuasion, to convincing folks, to making your case, right? And you seeing it as a skill, both resilience, but also you moving forward in your advocacy and your way of doing that, you're not going to be eroded as a community professional. And quite to the contrary, you'll feel yourself strengthen as an advocate for your community to leadership and vice versa. Next thing, protect your perspective. It's very easy for us as community managers, especially earlier in our experience, to adopt the view of the corporation. And the shame about that is it inherently means that we then leave ourselves at home. The very passion and the joy de vivre, not good at saying it, but ultimately that we represent at interviews can sometimes get dulled by corporations and the strategic aims and things like that if the culture doesn't support you being yourself. A beauty of you being the community manager that you are, and whether you are a community manager that is backstage or more front of stage, is your unique perspective, your point of view, and your attitude towards advocacy or the very thing that you're advocating for. So it's important for you not to give away or dismiss your perspective. There is nothing wrong with saying, this is actually my gut feeling. I hold my hands up. There's no metrics to this. There's no feedback, but this is what I'm sensing, right? There's nothing wrong with having that in the space and communicating it in a way that works for you. And in those moments of protecting your perspective, one of the important things to remind yourself is to get into the helicopter and don't forget to take pictures. Sounds super abstract. I'm going to break it down. There is an exercise that can be really helpful when you are in the weeds of things, right? And we can be honest here. I'm talking about the moments where you take a breather from the meeting, the moments where somebody turns to you and go, Jaz, have you got anything else to add? And you have a lot to add, but you just want to take a moment. You want to be intentional and you say, no, not at the moment, just processing a few things, right? Because you genuinely are. These are moments where it's helpful to step out of the situation and put some distance between you and the cause that you're advocating for. Get into the helicopter and get that aerial view, right? And this is about you having your perspective, owning how unique it is, seeing it in its fullness. And then when I say don't forget to take pictures, share it with the folks in the room. Quite often, when we are advocating, we can get so entrenched in our own perspective and what we know to be true and what we've seen and what we've read in the feedback that we forget that sometimes others don't have that perspective. They don't have that experience. They don't have that evidence. They don't have that art, right? We talk a lot about business. Is it an art or a science? Community, we could have the same argument. But when it comes to protecting your perspective, you need to own it and not give it away. And remember to enlarge it and share it as you're advocating. The next thing to really, really think about is focusing on your purpose. Again, we're going to be open in this room. There are moments where I've sat in my seat as a community manager and I've thought, if this doesn't get through, what is the point of me as a role? Not a human being on the planet, but as a role. And quite often, there are so many times where we can become so impassioned and consumed by the cause that we're advocating for that it is difficult for us to remember our purpose and anchor ourselves in that. Sometimes our purpose is to generate revenue. Sometimes the purpose is to grow. Sometimes it's to implement change and transformation. Sometimes it's to grow connection or increase retention in a product or in a cause or things like that. Sometimes it's a mixture of all of those things. And quite often, the thing that we're advocating for can either fall in line with that or not. In the day-to-day moments of advocacy, it's very, very easy to get into the weeds. And what we want to do is be very, very strategic about our roles as community managers, as about our position as community managers, and the expectations that are placed on us, alongside the expectations that we are fully, wholeheartedly bought into. You may see your purpose as fostering connections, right? Others may see that as driving retention and just cash. Show me the money, right? Again, we're talking about those sticky moments. It's important for you to focus on that purpose that you hold dear while also keeping an eye on the almost the expected purpose that you have as you go about this advocacy. Now, sometimes this can mean that advocacy becomes even more challenging. But again, when we look at it in the day to day, when we look at it in our conversations, it's important again for us to borrow that person's shoes and understand if you think that I'm driving retention and that's all I'm here for, don't agree with it. However, that's the language I'm going to speak to when advocating. I'm going to show you how this purpose, and this cause, which is a value add, can eventually lead towards that retention, can lead towards what you think my purpose is. And in many senses, this is an important space for us when it comes to advocacy to remember that a huge part of our advocacy is us owning our position, owning our impact, owning our unique perspective. And again, like I said, cultivating the resilience to go again and again and again. And the last thing I want to share about that point on resilience, jumping back, is that it's also important for us to remember these moments, be it the micro advocacy or the macro advocacy, as wins, as moments of learning, regardless of whether it went your way or not. You cultivated it as a skill. And therein, through cultivating resilience, protecting your perspective, focusing on your purpose, you can then continue to advocate and be that 360 person that doesn't feel like they're being dragged in two directions. However, in fact, you feel like you are mediating. You feel like you are of use. You feel like you are the linchpin. For those of you who aren't familiar with the term linchpin, imagine a bicycle, right? A bicycle wheel, and you've got the spokes, right, coming out, and you've got the bit in the middle. Now, I'm not an engineer. I have not taken apart a bike, but I can imagine if you pull that pin that's in the middle out, the wheel comes apart from the frame and we're off the cycle. See yourself and own your unique space as a linchpin, as a community manager. It's so important for you to see advocacy not only as a part of your role, but you as an advocate. If you see yourself this way, if you see yourself as resilient, if you see yourself as somebody with a unique and precious perspective, if you see yourself who has a role and a purpose, you will become more and more effective as a community manager. and you'll be less likely to burn out. This is what this is about. The whole conversation is for us to stay in this industry, for us to transform organizations and communities and cultures through our work. And it's difficult to do that if we are becoming fatigued being in that messy middle, being in that stuck place. So that's what I want to leave you with today. Cultivate your resilience, protect your perspective, and focus on your purpose.
That was glorious. Thank you so much. We've got some questions for you if you are ready. Fabulous.
Yeah.
Okay. So first out is a kind of a big one. So how do you control your own impatience when there's something that needs to be advocated for, while
Mm,
simultaneously you need to get in that helicopter so that you can be intentional?
mm. Ooh, this is a great question. And this is something that I experienced last month. And I quite literally had to step out of the conversation. It was happening via Teams. So I let the conversation go with the other two individuals in the chat and took time. The other thing with it as well is I had to see which parts of it was me feeling personally upset. There's no other way to put it. I'm upset. And which parts are the emotions that I am carrying, right, as an advocate for my community and being able to differentiate those. In terms of my feelings of being upset, that's where I took the space. In terms of me being an advocate and holding this precious feedback and this need and this want and this desire, I had to get into the helicopter and remember that it was that. I also have to recognize, and sometimes it can be helpful. It's not fun, but helpful to start to reframe things and think, okay, they're saying no now. How can I move it 1 inch from a no to a not yet? How can I move it from a straight up no to a no with some rationale behind it? Because again, you want to be able to, we hold ourselves accountable to our community to communicate back. But I would say it would all start to with yourself. Do not be ashamed to take space. We've got a lot of thoughts here. Could we put some time in next week? Could you clarify that for me? And I'll circle back later on today. About to hop onto a call. Could we pick this up later? Whatever that looks like, create that distance so that you can protect yourself as the advocate and then go back into the conversation with your strategic hat on. Don't leave your passion at home. Not saying leave your passion at home, but channel it into that strategic conversation.
Absolutely. Something big that I heard you saying is name it to claim it.
Mm,
Say it aloud, take it for yourself, put it aside, and now objectively move forward. That's what I took from what you just shared. We've got 1 minute. I've got a final question for you, but there are a few questions in the chat. So when you get back, you can
yeah.
pop around in there.
Yeah.
So you talked a lot about getting into the weeds.
Yeah.
And what advice would you have for community managers in building resilience around regularly pulling themselves out of the weeds?
Mm, yeah.
How do you build that muscle?
Accountability. Two ways. Talk to somebody who has a lot of empathy for what you do. Communities like this, perfect for it. Second way, talk to somebody who has no clue what you do, right? Think of your most blunt friend, right? The one who's just going to blink at you and go, and so, uh, right? And if you have a conversation with both of them, I guarantee you, you will find your happy medium in the middle. You will find your vanilla ice cream space in between the cookie dough and the lemon sorbet. But get that perspective, get them to hold the mirror to you. And again, these are folks that know you. Please do not pick a frenemy or an enemy. Folks who know you, trusted safe space where you can be open and honest and they can hold the mirror and go, is that really true? Is it really that bad? What else can you do? I don't know what you're talking about, but it sounds like a conversation could be cool.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for your time and inspiration. You've got people going off in the chat, so definitely get over there and share some more of that knowledge. And thank you so much for being here and for creating such an excellent talk and stirring up some thoughts, really thought-provoking stuff. So from coach to coach, thank you, blessings, and I'll see you in the airwaves.